Hey guys, welcome back. Today I'm going to test fit this radiator. We've been working on the wiring. That was a very time-consuming process. It's still not completely done, but there's some other things that I need to get installed and in place before we can finish up the wiring. Part of it is I got these wires run across the front of the engine bay here. We need to make sure that those clear the radiator. They should. The original wires were also in that location. We need to make sure that the cooling fan pigtail or the wires that I left on the end of that harness are going to be long enough. I still don't have connectors to connect my harness to the cooling fan. The cooling fan didn't come with any kind of jumper harness or something like that. You're probably supposed to order that separate, something I didn't know about. So I'm probably going to get a couple of pigtails off the internet or just the housing ends and connect it to my harness that I've already built. So let's go ahead and throw this in there, see if everything lines up the way we need to, and then we can start checking on the radiator hoses. So I'm just gonna get one bolt started here, and then we're gonna switch over to the other side and get that bolt started. With that bolt started over there, I'm gonna put a bolt in this side, and I'm just doing the top two bolts, and that doesn't fit. None of the bolt holes on this side are close enough to get a bolt in. It looks like the holes are a little too narrow. So I guess I'm going to pull this back out and we're going to file those holes because otherwise we can't install this. So what I'm doing is I'm just extending this oval out just a little bit on both sides. I was about 1/8 of an inch off by looking at it, so I don't have real far to go. I'm just going to do it by hand. A coarse file works good because this stuff is aluminum. If you use a fine file, it'll plug up fairly easy. This one is a little finer, but now that I have the holes mostly done, I'm just going to go in and smooth them out a little bit. Let's try this again. That fits. I'm going to see if it fits up against this wiring harness, make sure I don't need to move anything. And I'm hitting on something here. And my wiring harness is in the way, so I can't see what it is. I don't think it's the wiring harness. It's the bolts for the where the hood latch bolts to the core support. They protrude through and they're hitting the radiator right at the bottom of the tank. So we would either need to space this radiator out a little bit, which we have plenty of room, or put shorter bolts in here. I'm going to see if I can put shorter bolts in. If that will take care of my issue, then that's pretty simple. Otherwise, I'll have to try to find 6 spacers that will not look really crappy in here. I'm just going to loosen them up for now. There we go. Now we are mounted all the way up. That should be good. I'm just going to snug these bolts up for now. I'll get the other ones in there later. I can still turn these bolts in quite a ways before they hit. So as long as I just put some shorter bolts in there, we won't have an issue. And I'm going to put some flange bolts to hold the radiator in instead of a regular bolt. Now we need to look at the radiator hoses and see if they're going to work. I kind of mocked up some heater hoses over here just because the water pump kept dripping coolant once I pulled the caps off of everything. I'm not sure if this is how I'll end up with it, but for now it'll work. I ordered 2 radiator hoses with the kit from BRP Hot Rod. I don't think that either one of them will work quite in my application. This is part of one of the hoses that had another S-bend. Even though it's a little less than a 90 there, it gets me close. It's not kinked, it's sucked down just a little bit, but I think if I position this properly, it will work. If I don't find another hose at the parts store that'll work better. The lower hose, this hose isn't even close. If it's hooked onto the radiator, it comes up right there. There's not enough room to angle it. If I go the other direction, I'm in just about the same boat. So I really don't know what that hose was meant to fit. They showed several different ones on their site. The other 2 that they showed said they work better in smaller engine bays. I have a huge engine bay here, so that's not really the case. I don't know, I'll run with this one for now, but I'll probably see if I can find one that has more of a 45 instead of that probably 80-degree bend that this one had. And I'm gonna have to figure something else out on this lower hose. I may end up having to change this outlet. If this was pointed down, it would be a lot easier to adapt to this hose because it would be pretty much a straight shot with just 190. So if that's the case, I've seen different outlet housings for these. I've seen adapters to where you can run the small block Chevy thermostat. So I'll have to do one or the other if I can't find a hose. This is the loom I left here for the cooling fans. I just kind of left a little bit of extra wire there. I can run it down the side of the radiator. It's actually, I just barely left myself enough room to connect there. I thought I left more than that, but you know, you have to go by whatever your shortest wire is. So I'm gonna have to lop those other ones off by about 1 inch. But it should work as long as I don't screw it up. I just need to find the proper connectors for that first. I could build this with the MetroPack connectors that I did like the fuel tank, but I think these probably pull a little more current or hold a little more current than those connectors. I'm not sure. I should probably just run one of these fans and see how much it pulls, and that'll tell me if I can run one of those MetroPack connectors. So I have this red and yellow wire hooked up to one of the cooling fans running through my amp clamp, which is displayed here. Let me zero this out. And we'll hook it up and see how much that fan pulls. So it looked like it spiked to about 20 amps when it first turned on, and then it kind of leveled out to 10 amps. It may have spiked higher, but from what I can see on here, that's okay. Most fuses will, you know, they'll allow a large current to jump real fast, and then as long as it's not a steady pull, they won't blow. I'm also going to wire this up how it's going to be wired through the fan relay when I'm running on low speed, and see if the amperage doubles, because on low speed it's running the power through both fans, or if it actually drops that current down. So quite surprising, low speed fans are only going to pull 5 amps. But since that's the case, I think I'm going to go ahead and crimp on some connectors that I have here in stock. Okay, so here's all the stuff I'm going to use to change those connectors. These are MetroPack 280 series connectors. I've read two different specs. Some say they're rated for 25 amps and some say that they're only rated for 20, and I've seen one that said 30. So either way, if it's only down to 20, that's what these fans pull when they turn on, but after they're running, they're only pulling 10 amps each, even when on high speed. So we have connector bodies, pins, these are for 12 gauge wires, and cable seals. And then these deals lock all that stuff together when we're done. I'm gonna cut those connectors off, crimp this stuff on. I'm gonna make sure to wire them both the same. That way they can be plugged into either one. They'll work just fine because both fans run on high speed, both fans run on low speed. Okay, I now have those hooked up on here. I had to reference my wiring from the fuse panel because it's been a while and I forgot. Plus, I had to pull the relay out and check resistance because I didn't have all the same colors as I put in my diagram and didn't update my diagram after I changed the colors on here. So, since I have the battery power hooked up to the fuse panel and the grounds are set up, I can now test this just by jumpering the relay. So this guy here is a deal that I can bypass the relay on and off. It's got a loop here so I can hook an amp clamp onto it. I've got a couple of these. I already have another one installed in the fuse panel. Now, the only thing with this is it only has 2 pins, so you can't run through the center pin. So I have this in cooling fan number 1 slot. I believe that it's cooling fan number 1. I have a relay installed in number 2, and I have this relay tester installed below the relay for number 3. So what this will allow me to do, since I don't have an ECM plugged in down here, I can turn this switch on and both cooling fans should come on low speed, and we're going to verify that they spin the same direction. And then with that turned on, if I energize this relay like the PCM would, then both fans should turn on high speed. I also have my amp clamp set up over here on the battery so we can see what kind of amperage we're pulling. So I'm going to flip the switch on and off a few times and verify that both fans spin the same direction and that they're spinning in the right direction. Okay, it appears that they are both spinning in the correct direction. So I'm going to turn that on and see what my amperage reading is. We're showing the same 5 amps that we had earlier. Now I am going to ground this wire that I have hooked up to this relay here, and that's going to energize this relay, and it's going to switch power from that center terminal, which is 87A, over to 87. And that'll make both fans run on high speed. So I think I'm going to wrap it up here for today. The radiator required a little bit of adjustment to be able to fit in there. Had to widen up those holes. We got the cooling fans hooked up. So now I just need to finish bolting these down. Tie the wiring to the radiator fan, make sure it's not going to get into the belt area. Not real happy with the hose fit, so I'll probably have to go to the parts store and just scour through hoses until I find one that I like. We may have to change that thermostat housing to one that drops down, make it a little easier to find a hose. That'll be just a 90-degree hose if we can do that. Heater hoses, I don't know if those will stay there or not. I think that's about where the factory had them. I think they left the engine, went up over the fender and hooked up to the heater core. I really can't remember. I may have to go back to some older footage and look at that. The cooling fans do turn on. I don't know if they'll turn on with the PCM. We'll probably have to do some programming in that PCM to get them to turn on because that PCM is out of a truck and it didn't have electronic cooling fans. Now that we have the radiator in, we can also hook up the transmission cooler, because I really don't want to crank this thing over and have transmission fluid puke all over the place. Until I have the cooler hoses hooked up, I'm going to avoid even cranking it over. So that might be what I do next, just because every time I do park it, it leaks a little bit of tranny fluid out. You can just never seem to completely stop those things from leaking, even if they're drained. But I ordered some adapter fittings to go into those. Adapter fittings for the transmission. I ordered braided line, a whole kit that comes with the braided line and a pack of the fittings. So that will probably be the next step, is to get those braided lines on there so it quits leaving puddles everywhere. So thanks for watching the video today. If you guys have any questions, comments, put that down below. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, give it a thumbs down, but tell me why you didn't like it. If there was something I should have done differently, something you would have done differently, let me know, because I got time to change stuff. You know, it's not set in stone. Every time you build one of these cars, you build them a little bit different, and one way is not always the best way to do it. So let me know down below. If you want to see the rest of the build series, go ahead and subscribe, click the bell. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.